Hello and welcome once again to Yahusha's Call. Thank you all for your wonderful encouragement, and we love you with all of our hearts. And may Yahusha's blessing be upon you as we teach today the foundations of blood. A sobering message with a sobering purpose to Yah's people and to those Gentiles who have come to understand it. We're going to move right into the lesson. I shouldn't say lesson. It's not a lesson. It's a message. And this foundations of blood must be addressed in that we're getting ready. Some of us are getting ready to celebrate 400 years of so-called African Americans in this United States of America on next year, 2019. But I wanted to give some sobering information so that we can proceed wisely and in knowledge. For me, this is no heyday. This is no get out the drums and horns. My celebration will take place when Yahusha returns. But I want to give some sobering information because these things that we're looking at now are only really just flags in the road for what's coming upon this nation and all nations like it. We started off reading, if you can go back if you want, I won't read them today, Revelation 6, 9 through 11, Revelation 17, 18, and we read Matthew 13, 24 to 30. Go back and read those scriptures. A lot of times people think that I don't read scriptures, but I do sometimes. You have to go to the first series to hear but I'll be using more today. Let's go to where we left off, the account of the seed that was planted, the transatlantic slave trade where blood was shed, the colonial rule, worldwide genocide projects, pollution, diseases, theft of lands, the whiting out of people groups, the idea that the Europeans definitely will rule and are ruling today. And when we look at the statue, Nebuchadnezzar's dream in the book of Daniel, we see Babylon, Assyria, Mede, Persia, Greece, and we see Rome. And then we see the feet of this statue, which are made of iron and clay. And we see that as the UN. We know that's the UN. And we know it's the UN because Revelation talks about these 10 kingdoms. And the 10 kingdoms are actually 10 regions. And you can look that up. We talked about how many millions, 6 to 150 million, I should say Hebrew slaves were massacred in this slave trade situation. And then let's move into now that they've come to America, since we're getting ready to quote unquote celebrate. By the end of the Civil War, roughly 179,000 black men served as soldiers in the U.S. Army, 19,000 in the Navy. Nearly 40,000 black soldiers, 40,000 black soldiers died that we have record of over the course of the war. 30,000 of them, 30,000, they died of infection and disease. Infection, probably lack of care, and disease. An estimated 80% to 90% of this population perished after the arrival of Europeans in America. And guess who this is? The American Indians. A lot of blood. Huh? And I'm not saying anything against the fact that so many lives were lost in the Civil War. Right now, we're just saying these were slaves. These were ex-slaves given their pardon to fight. So they still were in bondage and dying for this country, since we want to remember. Central and South America at a combined 50 million to 100 million lost their lives. 18 million in North America alone. An estimated 80 to 90% of this population, these are the indigenous people, by the way. I'm talking about the indigenous peoples of the Americas. 80 to 90% of this population perished after the arrival of Europeans through genocide and diseases. See, back to what we were saying earlier, this nation is built, its foundations are blood. They're pillars of blood beneath this nation and European nations around this earth. In Australia, the exact death toll for massacres of Australians, indigenous people in the frontier wars is unknown. But it runs in the hundreds of thousands. You say, why are you getting over there? Well, you have to look at a pattern to understand what happened here in America. There's a pattern that is the same, whether it's in England or any of the countries in Europe. Because really, America is a European country. I know it doesn't sound right, but it really is. It was an English colony, all right? Well, I know they pulled out, but they're still part of the European chain. So this was a European colony. And of course, they revolted and became their own nation. But it was really European roots here. All right, and it cannot be denied. Our executioners, slave drivers, slave traders were Europeans, so-called Nazi Jews, Portuguese, and Arabs. All of them treacherous. But the main one, the worst of all these, the Europeans. The genocide of indigenous peoples and mass destruction of entire communities of indigenous peoples are understood to be people whose historical and current territory has become occupied by colonial expansion. A little bit about that word expansion. It doesn't sound too dangerous or too full of malice, but it's huge part of malice. The whole point of European expansion. I have an article here from EGO, European Encounters in the Age of Expansion. You can go on your internet and pull it up. Talks about how the 15th century Europe engaged in their so-called discovery resulted in indigenous proportions of people being slaughtered, maimed, murdered, killed, and whited out by having sex with the women and bringing these children into the world. Everywhere they went, they felt that they were supreme and that people around them, the indigenous people, were animals, heathens, anything but on their level of humanity. When, of course, we know that was not the truth. Why am I bringing this up? Why is this something important? It's important to keep our eyes on the prize. The prize isn't America for us. The prize isn't the little trinkets that they give us along the way. No, the prize is when Yahusha comes back, and I want to keep you focused on that, because I don't care what they're going to be putting on next year to celebrate how many years we've been here as slaves and semi-slaves, and how much we have contributed to this nation and this economy and this culture. You can never lose sight that we do not belong here. You can never lose sight that our ancestors, our mothers, and our fathers were a part of a crime, a hideous crime. And I don't want to hear. I know a lot of people say, "Well, we were destined, according to Deuteronomy 28, to be on slave ships and come back to Egypt again." That's true. But as always, and you can read in Scripture, the way it was done, the insanity, the debauchery in which it was done, that was not ordained. It's one thing to do a mission for Yah and then just go wild in it. And that's what happened. And the pain of what happened to our ancestors is still being lived out in lives every day here in this country and around this earth. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because many people are so excited about the 400-year, the UN resolution. Now we can celebrate 400 years of contribution, the HR 1242. I'm saying get excited about Yahusha coming, because celebrating here in the land of your captivity isn't where it's at. In fact, the people, I could go back to my ancestors, my great grandmother being a freed slave, came here under duress. They were stolen people. They weren't paying some kind of a debt for something they owed. And even then, they were supposed to release them at a certain time. He said, but you did not release them. Read Jeremiah. You did not release them. You kept them. You put them under Jim Crow even after so-called slavery was over, which really it isn't. And you have to go back on my program, The Second Exodus, and hear that. You're not free, and what are you? So I want to know what you're celebrating. Celebrating what you gave, celebrating your blood, celebrating all of your ideas and inventions being hoodwinked and taken from you. Your children being murdered in the streets. Are you celebrating that? I don't think so. There is nothing here to celebrate. We celebrate Yahusha here in the land of our captivity. He said we would call upon his name in a strange land. We would call upon him while in captivity. We can't go back to our land because the land is occupied right now with false Jews who call themselves Jews, but who are the synagogue of Satan. We're stuck until Yahusha comes for us. And we got to make the best of it through prayer, through fasting, through study, through understanding who we are as a people and getting out of these old, ugly ways through repentance. Yah is coming again through Yahusha, and he is claiming his people. Be ready. You won't find a dance on the street from me. You shouldn't be out there celebrating to the point where you're just delirious about them giving you this opportunity, because they have never made up for the fortunes that they have made on our backs and our blood. Never. Therefore, how can you be satisfied in this land? Let's look at colonialism, since we brought it up. As detailed in American Philosophy, From Wounded Knee to the Present, it's a book, it is also apparent that the shared history of the hemisphere is one framed by the dual tragedies of genocide and slavery, both of which are part of the legacy of the European invasions of the past 500 years. I remember, I think it was Gettysburg Address, President Lincoln, at the end of his speech, said, "We, for the people, by the people." And I can't quite remember the rest of it. Something about it, the nation. And I looked at that not too long ago. We the people, by the people, for the people. We the people, by the people, for the people. And it dawned on me what that really meant. Those of us who have, by the people, take, capitalize, capitalistic, take from those, but those people, the lower ranked people. What happens in American society is that for the people are those with, and by the people are those without. For the people, by the people, by the people's labor, by the people's money, by what little bit they got, we're going to take it. It's for the people, and it's by those who have not. If you look at the laws today, the new tax laws telling the same thing. For the rich, by the poor. That's your capitalism. That's what it is. Those who have, not like Robin Hood, those who have take from those who have little. But if you take a little from everyone, you have a lot. For the people, by the. What is there to celebrate, Saint? We know our contributions. We should study and know the contributions that our Hebrew sisters and brothers have in this land, have given. But it's mostly given blood. And I started off reading it to you that in Revelation 6th chapter talks about the martyrs, and people have always guessed who they were. Guess who they are? They're Yah's people that have been massacred and still being massacred and will continue to be killed all over the world. The Satan hates us because we're Yah's people. If I'm going to suffer, let me suffer knowing who I am and not ignorant of who I am. I wanted to read that one more time. As detailed in American philosophy, from Wounded Knee to present, it is also apparent that the shared history of the hemisphere is one framed by the dual tragedies of genocide and slavery, pillars of blood, both of which are part of the legacy of the European invasions of the past 500 years. Indigenous people, North and South, were displaced, died of disease, were killed by Europeans through slavery, rape, and war. What is there to celebrate, my friend? In 1491, about 145 million people lived in the Western Hemisphere. By 1691, time of slavery, the population of indigenous Americans had declined to 90 to 95%, or by around 130 million. This nation was built upon the foundation of blood, and blood will be its outcome. It will be its reward. What you sow, you shall reap. Saints, come out from among this Babylonian terror. Many of you have infused yourselves in this culture to the point you have forgot you are not free. You forgot our ancestors didn't come over here on vacation and decided to stay. They weren't refugees. Huh? They didn't come here on vacation and decide to stay. They weren't refugees coming looking for a place to stay to get away from violence. They lived in peace. They weren't tourists. They were stolen humanity. And this country's wealth is built upon their backs. First, stealing this land from the Indian, the indigenous Indian. They call them Indians, but they are the true Americans. And then by going and purchasing slaves to do their work with no pay. And cruelty upon cruelty upon cruelty. And yet we rose. Because we're Yah's people. We celebrate that. We don't need this government to help us celebrate anything. Let us resound aloud what Yah has done for us. Whatever they have, it'll be their demise. Whatever they took will be their demise and underpining. That's on them. We, as Yah's people, must give him the glory, not ourselves and no one else. When you let a country that have imprisoned you, murdered you, stolen from you, help you celebrate what? Well, we're Americans. Yes, I'm American by birth. And I do respect the laws of this country. But this is not my homeland. My homeland is Israel. Your homeland is Israel. So we're in a strange place. We're between a rock and almost in a hard place because we have some freedom, not total freedom. Well, no one has really total, but we don't have the freedom that our Caucasoid or Caucasian citizens have. In fact, if you be honest and really see what's going on in this country, they're trying to take more and more from you, not give you. More and more from you. Anytime a president could become president and the majority did not vote for him, that tells you something about this nation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And here you feel free. Here you want to celebrate. Let us not sing songs of Zion in the streets of this country. This is a strange and bitter land. Has the facade of beauty, but underneath is the bones, death, the blood of the martyrs. How can you celebrate on that? How? Think about it. Want to see us clowning in the streets again? Want to see us step and fletcher dancing? Want to see us singing for you? Want to see us entertaining you for next year? Say no. We're going to wait. And then we're going to have plenty to celebrate. I'm going to do one more Spanish colonialism, because Spaniards were vicious people, but not, again, as much as the Americans, the transatlantic. But they did do some pretty dastardly things. Horrible. Don't make it light. Though the Spaniards did not set out to exterminate the indigenous peoples, believing their numbers to be inexhaustible, their actions led to the annihilation of entire tribes such as the Arawak in the 1760s. I should say Arawak, Arawak, A-R-A-W-A-K. In the 1760s, an expedition dispatched to fortify California, led by Gaspar de Portola and Junipero Serra, was marked by slavery, forced conversions, and genocide through the introduction of disease. Canada, legitimating the process of physical and cultural destruction of indigenous peoples. In the 1990s, some scholars began pushing for Canada to recognize the Canadian Indian residential school system as a genocidal process rooted in colonialism. In 1829, with the death of their leader, Sanwa Dihit, the Bituk people and indigenous people of Newfoundland were officially declared extinct after suffering epidemic starvation, loss of access to food sources, and slaughter by English and French fishermen and traders. The executive summary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission found that the state pursued a policy of cultural genocide through forced assimilation. This is a spirit, saints, and is yet with us today. What are we celebrating? Our dead children, our massacred children, our gator babies, our men raped in front of their wives by plantation owners and managers, or whatever they call them, overseers and overlords, running through the swamps to try to get away to freedom. Celebrate when Yahusha come. Let them dance in the streets. Let them clap. Let them wave their hands. Let them hoop it up. We're waiting on Yahusha. We thank you for tuning in. Tune in for part 3. It's coming right after this one. You be blessed. You go with Yahusha. He certainly goes. Always with you. All right? Till next time.